Chair, Excellencies and Delegates, distinguished persons. It's a privilege to present my second thematic report to the Human Rights Council in my capacity as independent expert. I will also be sharing 2 reports on the country visits that I have conducted over the past year. I wish to express my appreciation for the responses received to the call for input to prepare for this report. The depth of engagement across a wide range of sectors is encouraging. I also extend my gratitude to my academic host institutions, the Yale-Jackson School of Global Affairs and the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria for their continued support. Today, June 20th, we mark World Refugee Day, an appropriate day to draw attention to a matter of grave concern, the growing and deeply troubling patterns of forced displacement based on sexual orientation and gender identity. As communities are displaced by conflict, climate change, and other crises, the risks for those seeking refuge are often made worse by restrictive migration policies and xenophobic rhetoric. Yet, for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and other gender-diverse persons, these vulnerabilities are further exacerbated by discriminatory laws, political scapegoating, and, in some instances, state-sponsored violence. Today, forcibly displaced LGBT persons face a double bind: escalating attacks on their rights based on who they are, coupled with increased hostility towards migrants more broadly, including in transit and in host countries. This report builds on a long-standing history of engagement by member states and UN entities which have consistently condemned human rights violations against LGBT persons, recognized their role in driving forced displacement, and called for dedicated protections and inclusion. Through the Human Rights Council, the General Assembly, and the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees, member states have affirmed principles of non-discrimination, equal access to assistance, and legal integration. This report builds on that foundation while highlighting persistent gaps in state action and the realization of equal rights for LGBT persons in displacement contexts. States must uphold the commitments of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, including the right to seek and enjoy asylum from persecution. These obligations require equal protection for all, including those displaced due to sexual orientation and gender identity. Human rights cannot be selectively applied. The principle of equality demands that no one be excluded or left behind because of who they are, whom they love, or where they come from. This report highlights that while conflict, climate change, and persecution drive displacement globally, LGBT persons face unique and disproportionate risks due to systemic violence, criminalization, and discrimination. In over 60 countries, consensual same-sex relations or gender expression remain criminalized, enabling persecution by state and non-state actors. Rising political scapegoating, hate speech, and stigmatizing rhetoric further heighten their vulnerability and contribute to forced displacement. Beyond state repression, LGBT persons often face economic exclusion, family rejection, and barriers to healthcare and humanitarian support, simply because of their identity. These intersecting forms of marginalization leave them isolated, highly vulnerable, and frequently overlooked in responses to forced displacement. For many LGBT persons, displacement does not end the danger, but changes the nature of the threats they face. As legal pathways narrow, many are forced into perilous journeys, exposing them to exploitation, sexual violence, and abuse. Not only from criminal networks and authorities, but also from fellow asylum seekers. Transgender individuals face specific challenges, including barriers to accurate identity documents, unsafe housing placements, and structural discrimination throughout the displacement process. Displaced LGBT persons are frequently excluded from humanitarian services and denied access to safe shelter, healthcare, and other essential support. States should expand safe legal pathways to protection and ensure that humanitarian actors are trained to meet the specific needs of LGBT individuals. Refugee status determination is central in international protection, yet LGBT persons often face significant barriers in accessing it. Barriers include fear of disclosing their identity, biased or inappropriate interview questions, lack of legal assistance, and status determination decisions based on stereotypes rather than their actual lived experiences. Many are denied protection simply because they are unable to safely or promptly articulate the grounds of their persecution. Some states have taken steps to address these challenges. In Poland, civil society groups have trained asylum officials and reception staff on sexual orientation and gender identity, including credibility assessment and barriers faced by LGBT asylum seekers. States should follow such examples by ensuring that LGBT persons can claim protection based on sexual orientation and gender identity, by adopting gender-sensitive procedures, utilizing inclusive documentation practices, and training officials to assess claims fairly and without bias. Upon arrival, LGBT refugees and asylum seekers often encounter systemic barriers to accessing housing, healthcare, employment, and community support. Discrimination by service providers, unsafe or inappropriate accommodations, lack of access to gender-affirming care, and exclusion from mental health and social services continue to undermine their safety, dignity, and well-being. Nonetheless, promising practices have emerged. In Mexico City, for example, local authorities provide public health services, including HIV treatment and gender-affirming care, to all individuals, regardless of immigration status. All states must take steps to guarantee non-discrimination, ensure early and equitable access to essential services, recognize the right to work from the outset of the asylum process, and implement targeted support measures to enable LGBT persons to live safely, build community, and fully enjoy their rights. In human rights work, protection efforts often depend on what is visible or reported. Yet most states do not collect data on sexual orientation or gender identity in displacement contexts, and existing data is often limited, binary, or inconsistent. Strengthening data collection and coordination among states, UN agencies, and civil society is essential. This includes both comprehensive data on displaced populations and disaggregated data that captures the specific experiences and needs of LGBT persons. This report highlights the specific risks LGBT persons face in forced displacement, from criminalization and violence to exclusion from asylum systems, services, and safe shelter. It outlines concrete measures states can take to close protection gaps, including decriminalizing consensual same-sex relations and gender expression, implementing inclusive asylum procedures, ensuring access to safe housing and healthcare, and improving data collection and coordination among stakeholders. As noted, some states have already undertaken important efforts to advance protection for forcibly displaced LGBT persons. However, progress remains uneven and insufficient in many contexts. I urge all states to take the findings of this report seriously and to translate its recommendations into concrete, sustained actions that uphold the rights, safety, and dignity of all LGBT persons in situations of forced displacement. Distinguished attendees, I now turn to country visits. At the outset, I wish to thank the government of Colombia for welcoming my country visit in May. I appreciated the opportunity to engage with a wide range of stakeholders, from state representatives to civil society, to acknowledge progress and explore ways to strengthen the protection and promotion of the human rights of LGBT persons. I will present my report on the visit in June next year. I also wish to acknowledge the governments of Mexico and Romania for extending invitations to undertake country visits. I thank those states currently reviewing pending requests and encourage others to do the same in the spirit of constructive dialogue and cooperation. I will briefly present 2 country reports based on visits conducted last year. In July 2024, I conducted a country visit to Albania. The resulting report outlines the progress achieved while also examining the gap between Albania's robust anti-discrimination legal framework and its practical implementation. The government has demonstrated a visible commitment to advancing the rights of LGBT persons, including through the adoption of the National Action Plan on LGBTI persons and active engagement in international human rights forums. Nonetheless, LGBT individuals in Albania continue to face stigma and persistent barriers in accessing education, healthcare, employment, and justice. The report underscores the need for strengthened data collection, targeted training, and adequate resourcing to ensure that legal protections are not only codified in law, but also are fully realized in the everyday lives of LGBT persons throughout the country. And in November 2024, I conducted a country visit to Poland. The resulting report, which looks both at the past and its impact in the present, focuses on the legacy of ongoing impact of hostile political discourse between the years 2015 and 2023, and the human rights challenges that continue to affect LGBT persons. It documents how systemic hostility, scapegoating, and exclusion from public services were compounded by the absence of legal protections and persistent discrimination. The report notes that local government resolutions declaring districts as LGBT ideology-free zones carried a powerful symbolic weight, conveying a message that LGBT persons were unwelcome in their own communities. While recent political developments have led to both substantive and symbolic changes, including an end to hostile political rhetoric, the abolition of exclusionary zones, and renewed engagement with civil society, the report underscores that meaningful and much-needed legal reform remains limited. Further action is required to establish additional safeguards and ensure the effective protection of the rights of LGBT persons in Poland. Thank you.